Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our youth workshop, The Art of Foley Production, a sound recreation workshop. I'm your host, Christy Tracy. I'm the education coordinator here at AOC Community Media, and I'm joined today by my good coworker, Matt Roberts, who is our community productions manager. And we will be leading you through the session today on Foley production. Sort of the breakdown of the workshop, we're going to be starting with a little bit of insight into the realm of Foley, what it actually is, where it came from, and how it's applied today in the film industry. That's the first part of our workshop. And the second part there, we're going to get a little bit of basics of sound capture with Mr. Matt, who's going to be walking you through some of the different tools and techniques that you'll need for some good quality Foley sound capture. And then we'll just wrap up with any questions you might have at the end and a little bit of a challenge as well. We've got a short video that you guys will get to watch and kind of challenge yourself to get creative with the Foley craft. So as we get started, we are going to kind of start here with a short video. We've got a video here. It's actually a commercial. This is a Kit Kat commercial, probably from the 2000s. This is a short 15-second commercial that I would like for you as the audience to sort of watch and observe, particularly the sounds that you hear. Okay, for the next 15 seconds, kind of zone into this commercial, and I want you to focus on the things that you are hearing, the different sounds that you're hearing, and we'll kind of analyze some of those after this video. All right, so did you take note of any of the different sounds that you hear? There's a lot going on within that 15 seconds. Particularly, we heard a lot of different crunching. We heard the biting, the signature Kit Kat breaking of the bar. We heard a lot of those little bits and pieces of sound. There was the paper, the Kit Kat paper that was being ripped up. We heard was they were opening the candy, opening the chocolate bar. What else did we hear? We heard a couple of sounds, ambient sounds in the atmosphere, right? What did we catch? There were a couple of office sounds. There was a bit of background chatter. If you recognize, there's a bit of background chatter going on. There was a telephone ringing a couple of times to really build that ambience of an office setting. Of course, the ums of satisfaction. You've got the talent in the video sort of giving their giving their thumbs up for that for the cake, for the chocolate. So some of the sounds that you hear, the goal of these sounds produced is to make that scene really believable and really captivating, right? As a really strong sale for those Kit Kat bars. And I'll give you this example because usually when I travel around to different schools, I will show this video sort of as a sample of marketing or advertising, and we'll discuss this video with students. But it never fails whenever I do present this video to students that I'll get someone who is really thoroughly disappointed, and they'll bring it up that when they have a Kit Kat bar and they're holding that Kit Kat bar and they break it, they don't get the signature sound. They don't get the sound that you hear in the commercial. So I thought it was kind of interesting to point out that the sound of that Kit Kat bar breaking and the sound of the candy paper that's being ripped, those sounds were recreated usually with some sort of object or some sort of prop that to sort of create that captivating moment within the commercial, and it carries the commercial. As you'll see, that 15 seconds was carried by that recreated audio. So there was a lot of sound manipulation happening throughout that 15 seconds. And also you could note that timing comes into play as well with that particular commercial. Just the thought that would have to go into timing out those particular sounds in order to get the effect that Kit Kat was going for. So all of those facets of sound come into play when it comes to sound recreation. Let's get the definition of Foley. According to thefreedictionary.com, Foley is a technical process by which sounds are created or altered for use in a film, video, or other electronically produced work. So sort of a basic definition of what Foley is. A Foley, when you're speaking about a person, particularly a Foley or a Foley artist, is also the title that you would give to a producer of that type of sound. So when you're saying Foley, you could either be talking about the craft particularly, or you could also be referencing a person, a Foley or Foley artist who creates those sounds. So their job is to use their creativity and their skill set to recreate these sounds, often using objects that we as the audience and the onlookers might perceive as being something quite different there. So these Foley artists, they produce these on-demand substitute sounds for objects or settings in film scenes that may otherwise be unattainable in a recording studio. Perhaps the objects that we need to bring into the studio are too large. Perhaps they're just too dangerous for a studio setting, or altogether just too difficult to capture those real-life sounds. When you think about the little sounds that fabric makes, or the sounds when you brush past something, sometimes they're so minimal and they can be difficult to capture, so that we use some Foley. We can throw in some Foley to kind of create that realistic sound and capture it in a better way. So these reproduced sounds can be anything from your clothing that swishes, or water being poured, doors that open and they're squeaking. Footsteps is a super popular one, and there's lots of different types of footsteps as well. Weather, when you think about wind or a thunderstorm, recreating those sounds as well are just some examples of Foley. And also, usually it'll be one person who's in a studio creating those sounds, or a couple or a small team who are synced and coordinated together to make that happen. So moving on to our next slide here. I wanted to show you guys some animations, because animation is a huge genre that is heavily dependent on Foley to really bring those movies alive. They rely on those Foley sound effects and those voiceover to really capture the essence of those characters. So just kind of diving into some of these pictures, I want you to think critically about some of these animations here and the sounds that would be present as you're looking at some of these video stills. Sort of analyze that. Think about what sounds would be present here. What sounds do I see when I look at these still images from video? And that thought process is a really important process when it comes to producing Foley sounds. It's actually one of the first steps in sort of planning things out. You want to be able to visualize, see that imagery, and visualize the sounds that you'll be hearing in the movie throughout. So that's really important to the planning phase there. So we're kind of getting into thinking about where to begin when it comes to producing these sounds. All right, so we're going to keep moving forward now with a little bit of history about Foley. And when we mention the history, we can't not mention this guy here on your screen. This is Jack Foley, and if you'll notice, his name actually is recognized in the name of the actual technique, just because of how much he was a contributor to the actual craft. A little bit of background history about Jack Foley. He was born on April 12th of 1891 in Yorkville, New York. And he was the grandson of Irish immigrants. And he grew up in the Seagate section of Coney Island, New York, where he attended public school. So when he was a young adult, Foley moved to Los Angeles, California. Why? Well, he wanted to work as a double and a stuntman in a small filming studio where he made a lot of contacts, in the Hollywood. So his new career was briefly interrupted due to World War I during the early 1900s, where he took part serving his country as a member of the American Defense Society. So after the war, though, he continued his career and he just remained working in Hollywood, producing as a director for silent films. So after getting back into the industry, it wasn't long after that sound was introduced to those two movies. And Jack found himself creating some of those footsteps and those body movements for some of the star actors on screen. So as you'll kind of see as we're going through these slides here, Jack and his crew, they always aim to create those perfect sounds that would truly fit the personality of the characters that they were filming the scene for. So by doing so, he and his Foley crew, they weren't just focused on being noise creators. They didn't just want to produce sounds. They wanted to be genuine performers in their craft. And they would use anything that they could imagine and conjure up in order to simulate these different sounds that were needed for the films. So it wasn't just merely, just okay, it's a movement of clothing, but it was the same as acting to him. And so he really aimed to reproduce the personalities of those characters that he filmed to the best of his abilities. And so much that he wanted to become these characters. He wanted to truly become them through sound. And because of his contributions and his dedication to that craft and really sculpting out Foley, that's why the craft that we see today does carry his name, because he was such a great contributor to that. So just a little bit about the history and where that comes from. Right, and on our next slide here, you guys will get to actually see a bit of Foley taking place in action. So we've got a video. It's about 3 minutes long, but it's a really great video for demonstrating the art of Foley production. So historically, this is how Foley was produced and synced up with video. So what you're looking at on the left side of your screen is going to be the scene from a film. This is the actors, the characters who are acting out on screen. And on the other side of your screen, you've got two Foley artists who are here in the studio. And they are producing the sounds that you see on the left. So you guys get to see kind of how that real-time sync was happening. And I think it's a pretty great example of just showing how much preparation would have to go into producing some of these films and what these Foley artists would really have to put into it. So we're going to go ahead and watch some of this scene play out, and then afterward, we'll kind of analyze and discuss some of the different sounds that we see. So as you're watching and observing that, see if you can point out a few of those interesting objects that make sounds and what sounds they are substituting in the actual video. Let's check it out.
Foley is the process of creating sound effects live in the studio along to a pre-recorded piece of video. A Foley artist uses a variety of props to create or replace sounds that could not properly be captured on set. Here, we see two Hollywood Foley artists bringing an action sequence to life.
We're out of sync. What do you mean?
All right, so did you notice any particular sounds there? I'm sure there was a lot going on in the studio. Definitely a lot of movement happening, a lot of sounds being produced. I know there was a lot of, if you notice in the crashes, you notice sort of kind of objects went flying and certain objects at particular time points as well. I think timing is something really important to recognize when it comes to the Foley craft. Timing is everything. And sort of you can see at the end of the video, they kind of ended the video with, well, we ended that point right when they were falling out of sync, when they mentioned, oh, we're out of sync now. They kind of just said, oh, we kind of messed up the timing there. So that timing was really key when it came to producing Foley sounds. I know that today's Foley productions, there is a little bit more flexibility. Artists like So in the video, they were recording Foley sounds in one long take, just trying to produce the entire take at once, which is an incredible skill set required. But with our modern film editing techniques, we do have a bit more flexibility because Foley artists can focus more so now on those particular individual sounds. They can do multiple takes, and the effects that they create can be further taken into editing through an editing software. So there is a bit more a leeway when it comes to producing Foley today, now that we do have more access to the technology. But again, some interesting sounds to note within the video, interesting props as well. And in our next slide, we'll dive a little deeper into the props that you'll see in an actual studio. So we've just seen this great example of Foley sound live and direct in effect. And this is just this slide has a bit of a closer look into some of the different objects that are used to create or recreate sound. If you'll notice kind of here what we're looking at, we've got a studio setting, which is usually where the bulk of Foley is produced in some sort of recording studio. We've got a couple of different, if you look at these objects here, a couple of different objects that make quite a few different sounds, and many objects that can make multiple types of sounds. So we've got, looks like some silverware here, even some cookware that probably may do a bit of banging sounds. We've got a telephone. You see the guy on the left here, he's actually holding a pair of boots, which I'm going to assume are for some stepping, for some footstep movement there. There's also a pair of shoes right next to him as well, which implies there's probably two characters who are going to be doing some walking. So you've got a couple different types of footstep sounds there. Even paying attention to the ground, there's a bit of the floor texture, the different surfaces, all of those bits and pieces sort of come into play when you are producing different sounds and you want to create different types of sounds that will sync and sound authentic with the actual video. So just a little peek here into the types of sounds, objects, props that you can use to produce Foley. So now that we've got a little bit of a peek into the studio, we can kind of segue into how Foley sound is captured. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swing over to our community productions manager, Matt, who's going to give us a little bit of insight into some of the basic tools that you would need when you are producing Foley in a studio, or maybe some makeshift ways that you can try this at home. So he'll be discussing some of those tools as well as the techniques that you'll use to produce this as well. So I'm going to swing over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Christy. So some of the tools you'll need for Foley recording is number one, a nice studio. This is a nice space to make and record sound. Ideally, you'd use sound dampening tools like a drape or acoustic paneling, acoustic foam paneling. You can always add effects like reverb if you need it in the editing software after the final recording. Is there anything you could use in your house to dampen sound? You might have said things like couch cushions, or even curtains, or sheets, or comforters. Things like this can be used in a home studio environment to dampen sound and get a nice clean recording. Since one of the primary duties of Foley artists are to record footsteps, a lot of studios are going to come equipped with a lot of shoes, a lot of different types of shoes, boots, flip-flops, sneakers. Any different types of shoes you could have would open up your options to the types of sounds you could record. Another very unique tool that they have in Foley studios is Foley Pits. These are specialty floors that come with multiple panels, usually different floor materials like wood or marble, different things that floors would be made of. In addition, they also usually have pits where they'll keep things like gravel or dirt or sand or other outdoor types, floors or grounds that you might walk on. Another important tool in the Foley world is microphones. Foley artists use a wide variety of microphones to capture different types of sound. One type that they use commonly is a condenser microphone. Condenser microphones are very sensitive and they pick up a wide spectrum of frequencies. So from the high end of the spectrum to the low end of the spectrum in sound frequency. They're very sensitive, so you normally find them in a studio environment as opposed to in the field because they're so sensitive to unpredictable sounds. A loud sound could potentially damage them. And then they're also very delicate instruments because they have a very thin diaphragm, which is what allows it to react to the sound waves so sensitively. Another type of mic that they use is a directional or a hyperdirectional microphone, one that might look something like this, also referred to as a shotgun or a boom microphone. We commonly use it in film or video recording. It's what you most commonly think of in a video recording. These microphones pick up mostly in front of them, and they do a lot to sort of ease the sounds that are on the sides or cut out the sounds on the sides so that you can get a very directional shoot. It can also pick up sound from a little bit of a distance, unlike some other microphones. So you can use it to pick up things like footsteps. They're real good for that. And they're also great for taking out into the field to record natural sounds. What types of sounds might you guys record with a condenser microphone or with a hyperdirectional microphone? Can you think of different types of sounds that you might record with these different types of microphones? Another tool that Foley artists are going to use is monitors. And they use both video monitors, screens, like you would use for a computer to watch television on, but also sound monitors, like headphones, so that you can monitor what you're recording and listen to it as you're recording it to make sure you're getting the best quality sound. Foley artists also use audio editing software like Audacity or Adobe Audition to add effects and edit sound. They can add effects like pitching up or down sounds to make them unfamiliar or something new. They can also layer sounds to make new and complex sounds for things like video games. These are some of the tools that you might use in a Foley session. And up next, we've got an exercise for you. We'd like you to listen to the Foley that's been added to this PSA and think about what they possibly could have used to record the sound. It could be anything, but how do you think they recorded the sound in this video? Thanks so much for joining AOC Community Media for this workshop, The Art of Foley. Thanks to Christy Tracy who put this workshop together, and thanks again to all of you. We'll be seeing you soon. Stay safe.